Okay, good afternoon everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this half-hour session. We're starting just a few minutes early perhaps, but that gives me a few minutes longer, which might be useful by the time we get around to 1:15. So welcome, I'm Bob Bannister, and we've got this topic, how we learn. Just for 30 minutes we're going to play around with a few ideas, thinking about how we learn and how we might apply that into our learning design as we go back to our workplaces and think about our learning solutions. You can probably tell which one I am of the team today. It's just been pointed out I've got one ear, I don't know quite what that is. We've got Grant here and Sally as well on our stand 371, so do come and see us at any convenient point, just literally round the corner there in a moment or two. It's really good to meet you. We're going to be thinking about interaction in learning design. So the first thing I want to say to us together is actually, could you please turn on your phones? The reason for that is simple. If I can't compete with that little flat screen TV in your pocket, then I'm not doing a very good job. But secondly, I want us to use technology just to share this afternoon and to think about some learning outcomes and share together some of the application of the theories that we're going to be thinking about. So we're going to use Twitter for that. There's bound to be somebody with Twitter in your row or at some point during your row, so be ready to fire that up at the right point, and we will share our thinking together and we can see what we're each saying. So we are iManage. This is the only advert piece. We're a blended learning supplier in the truest sense of blended learning. I think lots of people mean different things. We do a mixture of interventions. So we're a soft skills training company that deliver face-to-face in that 10% piece, 20% supported learning, a number of different interventions we can introduce there, but e-learning obviously, virtual classroom type stuff as well. And then the 70% piece as well, the social learning, the informal learning. We have a social learning platform to help our organisations we work with to share what's working well around the organisation. You've got all that stuff in those green bags that you have there, so please dive in at a convenient point. This little paper in there though might be useful now because it's basically the framework of what we're going to be thinking through over the next 30 minutes. There are just a couple of pages there. If you've not got this or you want a PDF version, you go to our website and click on the I Need to Know button. You can download a PDF version of that for your use later on. So fish that out, and that might be useful as we work through the session this morning. So what we're going to do is look at three ideas that come from the arena of learning science, and we're going to think about how we apply those in design of a learning solution, whether that's blended or face-to-face or just e-learning or whatever it might be. And the first thing we're going to think about is the idea of forgetting to learn. Now, come with me on a little journey, will you? I'd like you to cast your memories back. I'd like you to think about your childhood and maybe the garden that you played in, or the yard that was your back garden, all concrete mine was, with a greenhouse in the middle of it for some reason. But cast your mind back to that environment that you grew up in as a child, and I want you to go really more specific, and I want you just for a moment to remember something very specific about that garden, about the contents in that garden or yard, about the environment that you used to play in. Just give me a moment to think of that thing. So I can remember lots of little details about the garden that I grew up in. I can remember the big concrete slabs, and in between them there was really mossy patches, little bits of grass that I used to push my cars, and I always had to go over the little mossy bits when I got to the break. You may have thought of something else that's unique about your garden, unique about your memory, and it's quite possible you haven't thought about that thing for 10 years, 20 years, I don't know, 40 years maybe even longer, yet your brain has somehow retained that little piece of information and you've just managed to recall. Now, that's actually quite phenomenal, isn't it? Because we carry around in our brains all this information, all this knowledge that we don't call on very often, and maybe you've just recalled something about your garden that you haven't called on for many decades, yet it's there. it's lodged in the brain. Now we're going to think about, in this first idea, about how actually our memories work a little bit. Now some of you will be familiar with this particular graph, the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, the original theory of disuse. Most people in L&D have come across this at some point in their lives. It suggests, actually quite frighteningly, that after about 2 days you're left with only about 20% of the memory of the thing that you picked up 2 days earlier. So this massive drop-off. Now what's interesting is that this was 1885, okay, so this research is pretty long in the tooth. It was good, but it was only very much part of the story, and it's now being referred to as the old theory of misuse. So let's quickly introduce the new theory of misuse, disuse rather, not misuse, disuse. Very different things, those. The theory of misuse, I wouldn't go there, don't type that into Google. Theory of disuse, the modern theory of disuse, says actually that rather than being the enemy of learning, forgetting is absolutely the friend of learning. It goes very much hand in hand. Our ability to forget things is very useful. It's useful in a number of ways. It's useful as kind of spam junk filter for a start. It helps us sift and lose a lot of stuff that we don't need to hold on to. So, in any given day, you receive loads of information. Most of that will come in one ear and go out the other, or through your eyes and into your mind, and then disperse very quickly again. But the logic is actually, forgetting something helps us to remember it. Now the reason for that is simple. If you remembered everything, you know, if our retention of memory was 100%, you would never have to study anything more than once, would you? That'd be cool, but it's not realistic. We're not like that. The fact is we do forget, and Ebbinghaus had a point that actually our memories fade very quickly. After a couple of days, 80%, he argued, disappears. But the new theory of disuse, that suggests that forgetting is the best friend of learning, because if I forget something and then I remember it, the scientists tell us we remember it in a better way, in a longer way in fact. So if something's popped back into our memories a couple of days later, just as it's about to disappear from our memories, we'll hang on to that just a little bit longer next time round. And then if we pop it into our memories again, just as it's about to disappear that time, we'll hang on to it even longer during that period. And so that idea works. So if I'm about to forget something and I'm reminded of it, then I'll retain it for longer. And as I do that, just remember it before I forget, the periods of memory get longer and longer until it's lodged in our long-term memory. So the details of your back garden, your yard, that you've just recalled, were probably put there day after day after day, weren't they? As you played in the garden, as you messed about, as you cried and wept and cheered and cut your leg and did all those things. Those little memories build up time and time and time again, again and again and again, and they're lodged there. We can't forget them in an incredible way, even though it might be 40 years since we remembered that idea. That's a theory. Modern theory of disuse. What's the practical application in learning design then? So I want you to have a think about that, quick chat in your groups, just pairs or with the person next to you, and tweet. As long as you've got at iManage in the Twitter feed, we can all have a look at it and I can read some of them out and see what you're thinking. So theory of disuse, what does that mean when we think about designing great learning? Have some ideas? Tweet it. Okay, they're starting to come in. We have some success. This is good. I was going to look silly if there weren't any tweets that came through at this point. But, a real simple level, Liz, you put use recap questioning. Yeah, active recap is going to be a key part, isn't it? Of actually, during the course of an event, a day, we can use active recap to get people recalling pieces of information during the course of the day. Repetition, theory of disuse, repetition, repetition, repetition. We do learn, don't we, through repetition. It's one of those things that helps us to focus and log it in. So yeah, repetition is a great watchword here. Jan, thanks for following. Recycle materials regularly. So Mark, you put that. Have you got any more information to that? Where's Mark? I don't know where Mark is. Yeah. Any more information? Can't see. Oh, on the back. Yeah. So yeah, recycling materials. So getting them round and round and getting them out to people again. I can't hear a word you're saying, Mark. I'm really sorry about that, but we'll take it for granted it was good. Yeah. But, okay, what else have we got? Introduce new concepts, do all together, then go back. Reflective learning. Yeah, the action learning sets work in this way, don't they, as we work through. Needs several touch points over time. Now this I think is really important. It's important on my next fact that we're going to look at as well in a moment. But what we really need to do is to think about how we touch the learner multiple times, how we actually break up that big chunk of information that we are expecting people to retain and remember into those little packets that actually remind them of what they should be doing, helps them remember what they learnt in a session, that refocuses them, that effectively keeps it front of mind rather than bottom of drawer. So that's a great thought here. Regularly reviewing, establishing goals, likely to work best with regular testing. Yeah, we'll come back to the testing one. There's loads of tweets here. So this is idea 1. I've only got 30 minutes, so we need to look at idea 2, I think. So let's go there. Via this. Forgot about this slide. So here's an interesting scientific idea. If we learn something, then we should review it the next day. If we review it the next day before we've forgotten it, that's a good thing. Once we've done that, if we can manage to get to review it again a week later, that will stay in our memories much longer. It will stay, in fact, a whole month, so we can visit again a month later. And that will stay in our memories a whole 3 months. And this logic goes on. If we remember it in 3 months, we can then hold on to it to the 6-month period. By which time, actually, if we remind ourselves 6 months after that, which is 9 months in total if you get the logic, it's probably completely firmly embedded in our long-term memory. So we want solutions actually that take people's learning, maybe it's in a classroom or through coaching or through e-learning or whatever, social learning too, and we want to be able to remind people at these intervals very quickly afterwards, like the next day, a week later, a month later, 3 months later, even 6 months later, if we want to transform that thing from temporary memory into some permanent memory. So that's idea 1. Idea 2. Let's come to the next one. So idea 2 is how we learn incubation. So I'm going to give you a challenge. The only way of proving this is to actually get you to do it. So this is a challenge. It's a difficult challenge. If you know the answer, don't shout it out, okay? But think about this. A smooth dance, a ball sport, a place to stay, an Asian country, and a girl's name. What is the girl's name? Now, incubation theory suggests to us that if we take a break from something we're stuck on, then it massively increases our ability to resolve it and solve it at a future point. So I want you to quickly take a note of this. You can take a picture of it. You can type it into your phones. And I want you to put an alarm in for about, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 o'clock tonight, whenever you get your tea done and you're sitting at home. A reminder to see whether incubation has worked and you've got the answer to this. So I'll stand out of the way so you can take your photos. But a smooth dance, a ball sport, a place to stay, an Asian country, and a girl's name. What is her name? Now you might have the answer right now. If you have, keep it to yourself, it's fine. But past 6 o'clock tonight, if you put a reminder on your phone and you've got the answer, how about tweeting it? Stick our iManage there and tweet it, and we'll respond and see whether you've got the right answer and whether incubation has worked for you. So incubation says simply this, that if you have a break from something, then it increases your ability to solve the problem. And we know that, don't we? we know we get stuck and we go and have a cup of coffee or we go and do something different and we come back to it. There's those occasions where the penny's just dropped. Now that's scientifically proven. Our brains actually work away at things even though we don't know it. And we might pick up ideas and get new insights into something even though we're not tapping into it, which is quite incredible, isn't it? These two academics, Sio and Ormerod, said that it didn't matter what the break was. It could be a relaxing break, it could be a mildly active break where they were getting people to do something, or it could be a highly engaging break where they had to do something really mental and strenuous. It didn't matter what the break was. The fact was they had a break, and that resulted, look at the number here, on average participants remembered 90% more of the interrupted and unfinished project, 90% more where they'd had a break and there was an opportunity for incubation. Now that's an interesting idea, isn't it? That we might introduce breaks and interruptions into our learning. So let's just think about that for a moment then. They found that they could maximise the effect by interrupting people at the most important moment, when they were most engrossed. That helped people to learn and remember it more. But how does that apply then? How do we use a learning theory like incubation when we're designing learning solutions? So back to your Twitter, some ideas around the room. How can we use this idea of breaking into something at the key moment where you're most engrossed actually helps people to retain the truth or solve the problem, the truth, retain the fact. So, thoughts, ideas, quick discussion, tweet some thoughts. How do we apply that to our learning design? What else have we got here? Build energize is something different. I mean, that's something I love. We often use completely left of centre ideas that have come out of nowhere to be a distraction. This is interesting, isn't it? Because, mums say you shouldn't be distracted when you're doing your homework or your revision. And dads say that as well, I suspect. But this theory actually suggests being distracted is the best way. The learning scientists are saying 90% more memory when people are interrupted. Right, fascinating. Set a challenging question before a break time. It says, any other ideas? Any other thoughts coming through? Yeah. Trainer walks out halfway through, or an explosion halfway through. Yeah. Well, it could be interesting, couldn't it? Certainly wouldn't be uneventful if we did that. Here are some ideas, some thoughts that we like to think about. So, the fact, please switch on your phones, I said at the beginning. We've completely changed our view of saying at the beginning of events, please put your phones on silent. This theory suggests that's the worst thing to do if we want people to remember. We should be not scared about this world of technology that everyone's using and tapping into. These interruptions that people have at an event are beneficial to their learning. Do we believe that? So that's a brave thing to believe, isn't it? Well, we try that. We do that. And we think that's true. Interruptions are not the enemy of good learning. Design distractions into your learning solutions. Already suggested that on the Twitter feed. Encourage teenagers to listen to music when they're studying. Well, maybe all of us. Some kind of brain distraction, useful thing. Fragment e-learning. So we love the idea of incubation, and our e-learning packages, when our clients allow us, which is most of the time, are never more than a 10-minute module. Why do you want more than that? Let's give them an idea and give us some incubation time. It's better that they come back again in a couple of days' time and do another 10-minute piece of e-learning that's perhaps carefully positioned for them. So you can see how this starts to link with the first idea of forgetting to remember as well, actually, because we make it much more bite-sized, much more regular, much more intuitive and just accessible at a point in time. Then that's potentially increasing the learning. Okay, let's do another one. What's the time? About 10 minutes, which is perfect for the third one. So remember this? Smooth dance, a ball sport, a place to stay, an Asian country, and a girl's name. What's the girl's name? Let that incubate. See if you've got an answer later on. Tweet it if you have. It'd be fascinating to see. I don't know, will this work? It might work. Let's see. Do a real life experiment on Twitter. Okay, third idea then. Somebody hinted at this at one of the Twitter feeds just now, actually. The third idea is the impact of pre-test. So here's a pre-test. I'd like you to think about the first names of these two people. So if you could just, I'm pre-testing you what their names are. So I'd like you to actually just make a mental note of their names, please. I think they need some glasses. That would be good, wouldn't it? I think probably that'd be a good thing. Sorry about that. Okay, what are their names? Any suggestions? Shout nice and loud. First names only will do. Any names? Shelley? Jay. I can't hear it all up here. Okay, other names? Ruth and David, thank you very much. Yeah, so Ruth and David, that's a pre-test. You know nothing about the topic at all, or the people. Maybe you might just have known who they were, but most of you wouldn't. Pre-testing works best when the person knows nothing about a topic. And what pre-testing does is helps us to remember in a new way. So this is Helen Wozniak. You got that? Helen. Anyone have Helen? No, okay. So this is Helen Wozniak. Somebody had Helen. A hand went up over the back. Very insightful. Slightly spooky even. But anyway, Helen says this: a pre-test is not only a measurement tool, it alters what we remember and changes how we subsequently organise that knowledge in our minds. It does so in ways that greatly improves performance later. I'll show you how much in a moment. So that's Helen saying that. She's a learning scientist. And this gentleman, Manfred Spitzer. Anyone have Manfred? No, okay. Well, it's worth a try. At least we've got Helen. Manfred says something very similar, working in the same sphere. He says testing is a powerful study technique. Guessing wrongly, which you've all just done, well, apart from Helen over there, but guessing wrongly increases a person's likelihood of nailing that question or a related one later. The act of guessing engages the mind in a different way and in a more demanding way. Look at this number there. Pre-testing is most helpful when you get back to people quickly. So Helen and Manfred, yeah, I'm getting back to you quickly with the answer, but it can enhance retention up to 30%. Now that's not like the 90% we were just looking at in incubation, but that's still a massive level of retention benefit, isn't it? If we can get people to remember a 30% increase. So, at iManage, Twitter feed, how do we apply that in learning solutions? How do we apply pre-testing, whether it's face-to-face, whether it's e-learning, whether it's social learning, whatever we're doing? Have some ideas, thoughts, discussion. Let's tweet a few things. Setting goals, aims, and guides of practical exercises. Ask about the topic before any information is given. That's the idea here. That we could 30% increase people's retention if we pre-test before we give them the information. That's so easy actually to apply in a practical way, isn't it? It could be that, just get people to pretend they're the expert. If we don't know something, we want to learn something, let's pretend we're the expert first and pick up our own ideas and put those down and kind of answer. We can add pre-testing into our learning design. Clearly, we can put it in face-to-face stuff really easily. We can put it in e-learning really easily. And if you start to join some of these things together, so forgetting an incubation and this, you might actually start to feature in, say, an e-learning solution where you've got a bit of pre-test that's a complete distraction from the problem that they've just been thinking about before. So you can start to be quite creative in the way you actually build up the brain's ability to latch onto this, be engaged by it, and ultimately retain it. And then if we couple that with some mechanism that actually feeds over time, a day later, a week later, a month later, 3 months later, 6 months later, people are reminded of that content. We're really starting to put together a powerful package that can be retained